Hey guys, welcome to the FitTown Show. This is Coach Andrew, joined today by Coach Mel and Coach Austin. And today we're going to be talking about how often you should be competing in your workouts. And this is going to be a longer episode, but we got some really good stuff to share with you guys today. We're going to be talking about the benefits and disadvantages of competing, the difference between competing versus yourself versus competing with others, and what type of athletes might want to think about competing more in their workouts and what type of athletes might want to think about competing less in their workouts. So we want to kind of tell both sides of the story, some of the pros of competing, cons of competing, and let you guys start with what are some of the benefits you think with competing in the gym?
I like to talk about it in my kids program, but for me personally too, is just finding out like where your limit is, like where your boundaries are when it comes to knowing where you fail. Like I think it's good to fail. I like to fail because I just know that's where I need to push myself past next time. So competing helps me find that.
Yeah, I think for me, in anything you're going to stick with in life and be consistent with, it has to be some level of fun. And to me, like, competing is fun. Like, you know, even smack talking with like other coaches or members about certain workouts and times and things like that, like it just makes the environment fun, which in turn kind of pushes you to maybe outside your comfort zone of what you would typically do in a workout, and then makes you want to do it again the next day because, like we said, it is fun.
Yeah, and that can lead to having a purpose for your workouts, both in the gym and outside the gym, where you're excited to show up and you're shooting for a goal. You're not just going through the motions. You're probably going to give more effort because there's that outcome there. And then I've seen it too, where because people want to do better in the gym, they end up doing better outside the gym. They might sleep better. They might take care of their nutrition better because they have this outcome focus of competing and getting a better score. Yeah. What about the disadvantages? What are some of the cons of competing?
To me, the biggest one is never giving yourself enough time to progress. I'm going to leave it pretty open-ended in that sense because it could be progressing in a movement or a lift or any of the above. But if you're just constantly trying to push the upper echelon of what you're capable of, you're missing all the middle ground of actually improving that point, or that movement. So to me, that's the biggest disadvantage of constantly trying to compete against yourself or other people, like on a day in, day out basis.
I think there's a lot more negative to competing than there is like the training and practicing side. But most of it, beside the whole physical, putting your body through that wear and tear and not giving yourself recovery, the mental side of it, I think, is like the understated battle that people go through with competition is I'm gonna chase a PR all the time. That's mentally difficult for any athlete to go through. That's why like high level athletes have to really do mental training too to keep themselves from going down like into dark places when they can't hit a certain number or hit a certain time. Like that's really hard. And if you're constantly chasing that, you're going to add up all that negative wear and tear, but you're going to tear yourself down emotionally and mentally too.
Yeah, high level athletes also usually have an off season, and that's something that we don't really have that built in unless you go out of your way to build that in. So certainly that break from competing is not just a physical break, but it's a mental one as well. And yeah, I think injury is one of the biggest reasons why you don't want to compete all the time. And one of the big drawbacks to competing every day is that you're likely just going to get hurt if you're always focused on that outcome, which usually means that you're going to be ignoring some pain signals, what your body's telling you from time to time.
Yeah, you shut your mind off when you compete, for sure.
Yeah, and I think another underrated thing, so I think we kind of said on the plus side, if you're competing and you sort of rise to the level of your competition, if you have someone around you, they're going to push you to get more out of yourself. But that can also be a negative thing because at some point you could potentially end up being the best person in your group. You could be the best person in your class. You could be the best person in the gym. And if your only goal is to beat the people around you, then by competing with other people, you might actually be holding yourself back instead of competing against yourself or competing against a separate goal or having more of this like long-term focus would allow you to get better versus just, I just need to do enough to beat the person next to me.
Yeah. To your point earlier about how like competing and finding that point of failure is a good thing in the way that it gives you that purpose for your training. So when we get into training environments, we're going to take that a lot more seriously
Mm-hmm.
and dedicate yourself to the process of training because you have that goal in mind, that PR in mind. And when you're constantly just chasing and trying to hit the PR, you're not taking that step back into training, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's break that down for everybody, because that'll be kind of our next big topic here, which is the difference between practice, training, and competition. And practicing something is usually something that's going to be done like lower heart rate. We're trying to improve technique. We're absolutely not worried about any type of end result. We're usually getting worse before we get better when we're practicing something. We're allowing ourselves to not be outcome focused at all, and it's very technique focused, very mentally taxing from the standpoint of we're trying to try something new, trying to feel something differently, and we're trying to put a lot of mental energy and actually be thinking about what we're doing. Training, we start to turn the brain off a little bit. Things start to get a little bit harder. Maybe the heart rate's up. Maybe we're challenging weights, challenging intensity. But usually we're not going to let technique slip very much. There's still a good focus on technique. And we're combining sort of the technique focus with now some of the output of endurance and strength and all that. And then when we go to competition, a lot of the technique stuff goes out of the window when it comes to like listening to our body and thinking about what we're doing. We're trying to turn all that off. We're trying to ignore what our brain is telling us and just go. And we're very focused on the outcome versus, like the process of it all. And I always like to think about this with different sports, with like baseball and football. Like the sport of fitness is a sport. If you're going to come in and score your workouts, you got to realize that it's becoming more of a sport, and then it's comparable to these other sports out there like baseball and football and a lot of these sports that we grew up playing. And then I think you want to translate those same frameworks to that.
Yeah, to me that's the easiest comparison is like something as simple as like football. Like if you take their week schedule and kind of zoom out on it, they usually start with practice, like literal walkthroughs of plays, like where like moving this person to this person, like hit this hole, like this is how you tackle. And then you progress to more of that, like, okay, now we're going to increase the intensity, and intensity now maybe is like shoulder pads and helmet. You're still not hitting each other really, you're just kind of hitting each other. And then it progresses to maybe like you're scrimmaging. And then they actually ramp back out before their games. They go more to like walkthroughs again to make sure that they're healthy going into Sunday, which is their competitive zone. So even though like people look at the NFL and they're like, oh my gosh, like they're the most competitive people in the world, like they're only competing once a week. And then we come in here and we try to compete, 5, 6, 7 days a week. Like think about the toll that's taking like on your body, your, mentally what it's taking on you. And it would be the same thing for them. Like if they had a football game every single day for 7 days, like, well, most of them wouldn't be alive, honestly. Like that's how much damage it would do to them. And I know like the NFL has an issue right now of like, we can't play these short weeks. Like we can't do Sunday to Thursday turnarounds. Like what? That's like a 4-day turnaround, and that's what they're like complaining about. And then there's sports like fitness where it's like people are trying to compete every single day and they're wondering why their body's falling apart. Like to me, those are the perfect examples of kind of how you should almost set up your week if you want to get the most out of it and start seeing results.
I think someone can make the argument, well, that's a contact sport, that's different. And that's true, and that's why they only compete, if someone goes to the Super Bowl, they compete 20 times a year, right? They have 20 games a year basically. But even looking at basketball, like another sport that's not a contact sport, and they play
marathon runners, like everyone tapers their training.
Exactly.
Swimmers and rowers, and even if they're doing one thing that's no impact individual sport, they taper their training. They really have to taper off before they compete. Yeah.
I mean, people are complaining that there's a 3-month off season for NBA this year, like it's a big deal. And, we have to try to beg some of our athletes to take a Sunday off every once in a while, so it's very different. I think putting that into perspective is really, really key for a lot of people. I think one of the examples that I think is really easy for our members to grasp for both Beach Fit and FTX is like, what does practice, training, and competing look like for a workout or a movement? And I think rowing's a good example that applies to a lot of people here. Like if you're practicing rowing, that might look like taking your feet out of the straps and practicing strapless rowing. It might look like legs or legs and hips only rowing. It might look like using the settings on the monitor to work on the force curve and seeing that, working on your stroke rate, right? Maybe normally do a stroke rate of 27 to 30 in almost every workout. Well, let me practice going really fast one day. Let me practice going really slow one day and see what things I can play around with. Or, Coach Mel always tells me that I'm pulling early. Let me focus today on, I'm gonna keep my arms 100% straight till the very, very last second and work on that today. This would be all versions of practicing it. Training might look like, okay, I'm gonna take some part of that and start to apply that into my workout for the day. I'm gonna start to apply that into some rowing intervals, right? I'm gonna do 500-meter repeats, and that's taking the elements that we use in a low heart rate setting and starting to apply them in a moderate to higher heart rate setting, but the technique focus is still there. And then if we're competing, that's the day that we're doing Four Loko, FitTown Triathlon, maybe a 2K row for time. That sounds terrible. I don't want to do that ever again. And at that point, you might start with like a little focus on technique, but once you get a little bit into that workout, you're not thinking about technique at all. It's just, how can I get through this? How can I get the best possible score and try to PR, try to set a record for that day?
Yeah, for me, like obviously I like the barbell. I like Olympic lifting. So for me, it's really easy to compare it to that. Practicing is something that usually never gets done properly. I think every day we actually have a chance to practice in all of our classes. When we go through like a barbell warm-up, that is essentially a practice. Now, although it's not like you're not building the day around the warm-up, all those barbell reps or light reps are a chance for you to practice moving forward what you want your hopefully lift to continue to look like. As we build out a cycle of some sort, or we have a focus for a given amount of weeks, these last couple weeks we've been building on the snatch and the clean and the jerk. Secretly throughout these past couple weeks we've been doing that, and the thing that I see the most is if it's, I'm just gonna make up some random numbers, but if it's you have 4 sets of 3 snatches at 70%, you'll always see like someone doing like 80%, 90%. And what happens is whatever technique you had in the warm-up now slowly starts to get worse and worse and worse. And then you're starting to ingrain those movement patterns in. And then when it comes time to hit a PR, your body's already knows what it's going to do, and it's not good. But however, if you'd have taken those X amount of weeks that we've been practicing and hitting different positions and then kind of put it all together and let your body, move through the motions you just tried to ingrain in it, chances of you PRing are a lot higher than what they could have been or what they are at the end. I had a really good discussion with someone yesterday because we actually did a build to a heavy snatch, and the discussion was like, man, I have not PR'd my snatch in like, it was like a year and a half or something, like some really long amount of time, or at least for some people that's a long amount of time. And I was like, what have you done in that time? Like in that year and a half, what have you done to actually set yourself up to PR? Like, well, like I hit the snatches consistently and yes, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but what did you change in that year and a half from when you hit your PR to now? I'm assuming very little changed. And if you did hit a PR, I always see those comments like, hit a PR, but it was ugly. Like, so what you just did is set yourself up for another year and a half of, you're gonna have to wait for most likely another PR, because that's just what's gonna have to happen. You're either gonna have to get so drastically stronger that you can make up for this terrible technique, or you could do the fast version, which is take the weight off the bar for a long amount of time, practice it, slowly increase load and weight and percentages, et cetera, and then have the technique to allow you to lift certain weights. I always like people like yesterday were like, oh my gosh, I don't understand how you lift that much weight. And I'm like, I know, it's funny, right? I'm always last place in percentage work, but I usually get a pretty good number when it comes to like that 1 rep max. Right. It's because I understand how important percentage work is, technique work is, positional work is. It's because I kind of grew up like doing weightlifting, but those are my biggest takeaways. Like you guys have plenty of opportunity to improve that technical standpoint of whatever it is, that practice, and then over time you guys can slowly start putting it into more intense situations or adding load or going for that heavy for the day. But that's how I like to look at it. And just like Drew said, you can set that into like rowing or workouts or interval style workouts. There's a lot of different variations, but for me, that's the easiest way. And I think a lot of you will understand that to compare it to. So.
Yeah, I think there's like an underlying fear with people that if I don't try for that like maximal lift or get really close to that, then I never will be able to. Mm-hmm. And I think people that have that athletic background realize that they can stay around a 70 to 80% intensity, and knowing on game day they're going to be able to go to those higher levels as long as they're putting the intention into their training and their practice, right? You can't just go through the motions every day and hope it's going to be there. But when you're practicing and you're doing the mindful training, you don't have to go to those 100%, 105% intensity or lifting percentages in order to be able to have that come a competitive or game day.
Or never mention like I PR'd my snatch, but it was ugly. You just essentially said you evaded injury that day as well, because you didn't set yourself up with the practice or the training with the proper technique to support you going for that PR. So you did have sloppy technique and you competed with risky technique. So like to me, that iffy one is always the one where, okay, I'm glad you avoided injury, but that's the scary one for me,
I think another thing that needs to be said when it comes to this, and I know a lot of people, this will probably hit home, is even when you plan to compete, you can have a really bad day.
Yeah.
So like, I think, was it Michael Jordan has that like famous quote about how many shots he missed or whatever before his game winners or whatever. It's like, you could have done everything right leading up to it and you could still fail. I'm saying that with quotes because it's not a fail. You're still doing the work. Like you could still not hit whatever you thought or whatever you think you should be able to hit in the moment. And that could be because of a million factors. Can you come back the next day and get right back into the grind of practicing, getting better for the next time? Because you never know. It could be one of those random days where you suck on Monday and then like 2 Mondays from now when we do it again, you like hit this like 30-pound PR, because we see that all the time. Like if you can just stay consistent with it over time, you're going to get the results. It's just, you can't always expect like these highs. I think what happens is when we get into this to fitness is everyone has those newbie gains. They have like the 6 to 8 months, maybe even a year for some people, of every time they touch anything, it's a new personal best. 1, because they haven't done it. 2, because their body's adapting and it's like, holy crap, this is awesome, like keep going. But over time, like that starts to drift away, and then other things come into play, like practicing technique, positions, etc. Actually getting better at the small details so that over time you can continue to improve on whatever it is.
Well, we're not competitive athletes. We're moms and dads and
Speak coworkers. For
well, I'm not a dad, but we're not living in a bubble. We're not in a controlled environment, and we might have a toddler kicking us in the back before we come to the gym that day. We might have like got so amped up for snatch day, but someone peed in my bed last night. They crawled in bed with a nightmare and they peed on me. So what am I going to do today when I'm sleepless? Probably not my best. And we don't really forgive ourselves for those things either. Or, we're not controlling our nutrition the way an athlete would be, or our hydration, all the other factors that go into it.
I think it's a really good point, because I think one of the things that is hard for people is that in fitness, it's not always clear what exactly is practice, what exactly is training, what exactly is competing. Also, because we know that we're not like some Russian like militant place that's everyone's paid
Speak
to be
for
here.
yourself.
Everyone's paid to be here and they're like, it's on a set schedule. We know that it's going to line up for some people on this Friday. These 25% people are raring to go, ready to compete. And then these other 75% of people didn't sleep well, don't have it in them today, just came off a 3-month break. So we want to give the flexibility and put the onus on the client, the individual, to be able to decide that. So I think it's important to note that even though we might be doing a benchmark, which we try to shoot for like once a week in Beach Fit, once a week in FTX, and that would in theory be a competition day, you could, if you're not feeling up to it, make that a fitness or a practice or a training day for yourself rather than making it a competition day.
Go view the Heartbreak Kid leaderboard where I am dead last.
Well,
that was a training day.
Pretty typical, right?
So you PR'd or?
I beat the time cap. By like 9 seconds.
So I want to kind of point out some of these like higher level themes that people might think about when deciding between like practicing, training, or competing in a given day. So like one would be like our relationship to like pain and injury. Like, are we nursing an injury? Is this a movement that usually gives us issues? Do we, not sleep well where we're putting ourselves at risk for injury? So that's like a big one that we want to be thinking about. And again, when Mel points out, like most of us don't live in a bubble, we have a bigger why outside the gym. We don't want anything in here to sacrifice that bigger why. So it's really important that we don't let our competitive side take over for that aspect. Another one would be like kind of this idea of like a short-term versus long-term focus. So this is big. So even for the people that love to compete, even for the people that are like, I don't care what you say, like I grew up playing sports, I love to compete, this is my outlet now, like this is my thing, and I'm gonna compete because like I don't care, like this is really like the one thing that really like makes me feel good and gives me that like really great experience. Even if that's you, by competing every day, you're essentially getting the best possible score today at the expense of the best possible score tomorrow. So if you want to compete and you actually want to be as competitive as you can be, at some point you're going to have to sacrifice today's score in order to be as competitive as you want to be 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now. And one of the best examples I've heard explained in this is like Ben Bergeron's explained it as kind of like this big tree, and it's the branches on a tree. So when we practice and we train, we sort of move up the branches on the tree. When we compete, what we're doing is sort of going out further on that individual branch. So yes, with competing, you can get better in theory, but since you're on the same branch, you're maximizing that one branch. When you take a step back, you go back to the trunk, and then you practice and you train, you essentially climb up the tree and go to a new branch that then when you compete again, you extend out into this new branch where you can go higher. And if you never take those steps back, you're gonna be sitting on the same branch going further and further, and then it's just gonna be, you might be at the end of your capacity essentially.
Okay, I like that analogy.
I think that analogy kind of makes sense for injuries too. I don't know if that's how you were thinking about it, but like the closer you are to your trunk or to you practicing or trying to improve, the stronger you are. And then the closer you get to being a competitive athlete, the closer you get to injury, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the further that branch goes out, the weaker it is, right? So to me, that makes sense in injury too, not just like improving and trying to get better.
Definitely. So I also wanted to talk about like what types of athletes should consider competing less and what types of athletes should be considering competing more. And I think that's a big point because a lot of people that will listen to this probably could benefit from competing a little less, but there's probably a lot of athletes that should benefit from competing a little bit more. And I think we use the example of like benchmarks. I think if every single time a benchmark shows up, you kind of let yourself like take a step back and be like, oh, I'm working on this today, I'm working on that today. Like you're probably an athlete that needs to compete a little bit more and have 1 or 2 benchmarks a month, right? Not even a week, but 1 or 2 benchmarks a month. You say, you know what? I'm gonna attack this one. I'm gonna really see if I can set a PR and I'm gonna lay it all out on the floor today and see what happens.
I think for that one, I think of for the person who needs to compete more. You're talking about?
Either one, yeah.
So I instantly gravitate to the one who needs to compete less because I feel like I see that one a little more often on the FTX side. I feel like the compete more might be over on the beach fit side for me that I coach, but the one who I see that needs to compete a little less is the one who's so wrapped up in being on top of the leaderboard. And like, to me, it's not even a physical thing. The injuries can scream for themselves, but it's a mental thing for me of someone who gets so obsessed that they're looking at the leaderboard before they come in to see who posted what. If that person is like focused externally instead of internally, that's a red flag for me as an athlete of like, you need to put your phone down, stop looking at what anyone else did, and just come to the gym and do what you can do. Because if you're not focused on what you're doing and you're just focused on posting something onto the leaderboard, mentally that's toxic inside your body. Like the things that come along with that psychologically just aren't the healthiest thing. And that's really what we're all here to try and promote is your general health and your well-being. And mentally that doesn't set you up to be well.
Yeah, I think the saying is comparison is the thief of joy. And
Yeah.
that's like, yeah, if you're, I think there's probably people that can check sugar WOD before they come to class and do it in a healthy way. But I would say more often than not, it's probably being used in more of that unhealthy way.
Yeah, it becomes one of those things where you see people clearly put themselves at the risk of injury to do a number or to do a quantity of reps or to do a skill that they don't have, just so they can mark it as, you know, an RX workout. Or, you know, they'll say, what's the RX standard? Is it one ab mat for handstand push-ups, or is it flat ground? And they'll just try to do something that they can't physically do just for the leaderboard. And that's where I really think the trade-off is not healthy at all.
I think so the flip side, so people who should compete more, not that this is always a negative thing, but the people who just day in and day out just come in and just go through the motions, like you're going to eventually just get to a point where nothing is happening, and maybe even if outside factors are also coming in on you, it's maybe like less beneficial for you and for your health overall if you're just like in here doing random things. Like maybe it's like something like as simple as a ring row where you've just never tried to do anything more than your feet is back as far as they can, like just moving your arms this way. I think that type of person could definitely at least like once or twice a week, like just go for it. Like it doesn't mean like you have to be laying on the floor dying as soon as you finish the workout, but you know when you push hard, right? You know that feeling of like, wow, like my heart rate is up, I'm breathing really hard today. And I think those are usually the same people that tend to always have the feedback of that workout wasn't very hard.
Yeah.
Because I've never done a workout really that wasn't hard. Or if I wanted to make it hard, I'd make it hard, right? There's really nothing you can do in here that is easy if you want to make it hard, it's really easy to do. Like, just go faster, right? Like, go faster, go maybe a little bit heavier, whatever the movement is, like, make it more challenging. Like, saying something is easy is usually more of a sign of, like, how you're approaching it, how you're attacking the workout, not so much, like, what's actually written on the board, because you could do 5 minutes of burpees and do one every minute. It's not very hard. It's a lot of rest. Or you could do 5 minutes of you're doing as many burpees as possible, and everyone knows how that's going to end, and it's not good.
Mo's going to beat us all.
No, Mo, I got you.
I love that point. Like anybody who's doing shorter workouts or workouts with, like I'd say, longer rest intervals in them and feels like this isn't hard enough, that person definitely could benefit from more competition. It could just be competition against themselves. Like if it's an interval workout, all right, round 1 happens, you have a score, beat yourself, right? After round 2, beat it again. After round 3, beat it again. Like if you do that and you have that little bit of competition bug in you, you're going to come away with a very different experience. And you're going to see the result. The results are going to show. Like that's one thing we didn't really talk about in the benefits of competing, is that it then will transform into actual tangible results. Like you'll be leaner, you'll have bigger muscles, you'll look the way you want, you'll have better energy. Like all that stuff happens through challenging yourself, intensity. And if you're always just kind of at one level, always grabbing the same weight, same angle on ring rows, like you said, it's, you're not going to get better.
The flip side of what I was saying about using the leaderboard as a tool that could be toxic, like the exact opposite is true for that person who needs to compete. I hear it a lot from new members who are like, well, no, I don't even want to do sugar WOD because I don't care about my score. And that's the athlete to me that can use a little bit of competing, because I find that it can get you, sugar WOD's a great tool to get you, using a little bit of comparison of like, oh, well, this dude's 54 and I'm 54, and you know what I mean? Like, the excuse I was telling myself of being 54 can be removed through seeing that.
But it's 62.
A little bit of wrinkles.
You don't look a day over 60. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyways.
Moving on. So that person, I think, I always try to encourage them to use the leaderboard or use at least sugar WOD for themselves to compete against themselves, so they can log that kettlebell weight that they were swinging, or use those things to see how much better they've gotten, because then that generally sparks a little bit of competing with themselves of, oh man, last time I was using a 17 and a half pound dumbbell and now I'm using 25s for that dumbbell snatch. And if you don't have that, I'll see a lot of people stagnate in the gym, where I see them pick up the same weight every workout. No matter what the stimulus of the workout is, they go to their one 10-pound weight or their one 26-pound kettlebell or whatever it is. Is it 28, 26? It's a
pink.
purple.
Oh, purple. Whatever.
They go to that one weight, and then they just kind of gravitate to like, oh, this is what I do and this is what I know. And that person, you know, could be capable of so much more.
Yeah. Another place where I could see like one of these signs that you might be competing too much is if you're starting to cherry pick workouts and it's not injury related, right? You're not picking it based on like, okay, I just hurt my ankle the other day and I don't want to do a running workout this week, even though I could row. I'm going to just pick a day where I'm not running. Like, I think if it's outside of that, or you see it happening more than just like a couple weeks at a time, it becomes this routine for you that you're having to cherry pick days. Think about why you're cherry picking, and is it because, okay, I might not compete and perform and put the score up that I want, or is it for different reasons? So I know we've covered a bunch of different ways throughout this episode of how this might play out, showing those differences between practice, training, competing, but I think the examples are really helpful for people. So do you guys have any others that you can think of that might give people a better perspective on this?
Yeah, so for me, the other day we had Heartbreak Kid, which is one of our benchmark workouts, something that I've done multiple times, but I haven't done since we've introduced Sugar WOD. I didn't know my score, so for me it was a really good mental chance to just go, okay, I don't need to do this for a score today. I'm not trying to compete with myself today. I have a shoulder injury that I've modified for throughout that time. That's why I don't have the Sugar WOD score in there. And I decided, all right, I know this could aggravate me in my shoulder, so I'm gonna stick to sets of 4. And I'm gonna give myself enough rest to let my lat do its thing and not have my trap take over, know my body, and be able to do sets of 4 the whole way. That'll be a win for me today. So I kind of set myself up for, I'm gonna keep my high heart rate in this workout. I'm gonna, do the double unders, do the front squats at the prescribed weight, but I'm going to plan my shoulder with the sets of 4 for pull-ups. So, I came in dead last on the leaderboard, but I had a huge win for me because I was able to stick through those sets of 4 and not go into crazy, neck spasm and not overcompensate with my motor pattern. So I had a big win, really bad score. If I was competing, I would have cried myself to sleep. Yeah. But it was a good day. So that's a really good training one for me. Not practice, because I was in a workout, it wasn't, dedicated training for I wasn't trying to perfect my kipping pull up that day. I wasn't doing drills, but a good training format in a class environment.
I think I had another good training one actually yesterday. We built to a heavy for the day snatch, and then we had afterwards an AMRAP that had a snatches at a percentage of what you had built to. And one, because I feel like I gave a lot of effort to the strength, but two, just I wanted to be able to come back today and have another good effort. I made the decision pretty early on that I was just going to do a round every 3 minutes. And I think it was 12-minute AMRAP. So most people were going for as many rounds as reps as possible in that 12 minutes. And I took a step back. I wanted to focus on everything I had just practiced in the strength, carrying it over to my snatch. Now, I had done squat snatch in the strength and I did power snatch later on, but I wanted to keep my same technique and movement patterns from one to the next. And what I was focusing on was, can I do a snatch, take 2 breaths, and then get right back on the bar? And can I hold that pace throughout the 12 minutes? And for me, I found after the very first round, which I finished in 2:30, okay, if I can hold this exact pace for 2:30, give myself a 20 to 30 second buffer of just breathe and get back into the zone before the snatches, I can hold that. So for me, it was a training day of, can I hold this pace? Can I hold this effort? And then can I move really good? So instead of just going for it, which I know those last 2-3 minutes would have started to get pretty ugly, which you have to expect, mostly if you're in the competing mindset, your technique is going to break down a little bit. I didn't allow that to happen. So for me, that was a big training day on moving with intention through some stress of a workout.
Yeah, I think pacing is a big element of taking something that could be a competing day and making it more of that training day. I think today is another good example. Our FTX workout was a 2-minute interval where you have a choice of how many reps you want to do on pull-ups or bar muscle-ups, and that was not the score though. The score was the wall balls at the end of the 2 minutes when you got there. And if you were really trying to maximize your score, you would do less of the gymnastics movement, so you have more time and more energy for the wall ball. So, someone who's, again, having that mindset, they're going to sacrifice maybe the focus, which was more the focus of the day, was that gymnastics movement at the expense of a higher score. I think double unders is another good example. Like if you're someone that's never willing to try double unders, you're probably, you might be competing, or you might just be kind of scared to try that skill. Or you're willing to do really ugly double unders at the expense of a score for that day when you could be working on more efficient double unders. Like I'm not going to jump 2 feet in the air. I'm not going to wave my arms like a crazy person. I'm going to try to work on using my wrists and keeping my heart rate down. Like that would be a way to take a double under day and make it more of a practice or training day as opposed to a competition day.
And I think even the opposite can be said with something like a double under, where it's like people want to, like if it's 50 double unders in a workout, they'll try to do 50 even though they have like a max set of like 3 just to be able to click the RX button, and instead of getting like 5 rounds like everyone else, they're like barely getting into round 2. They're like, but I did it RX, but you didn't get a workout. So like what is more important, like the fact that you are on the RX leaderboard or you get a good workout? And I think at the end of the day, most likely has to lean towards that, get a good workout in certain instances. So
yeah.
I will give a shout out to some 7 a.m.ers because they took the workout today, and I would say they made it more of a practice for them, where their big focus coming in was to work on the gymnastics, so much so that they went easy on the bike and easy on the wall balls. And I mean, they made their mind up before the workout started that that's what they wanted to focus on, and that's awesome. Like if you want to improve on those things, like take the opportunity when it's there. Just know you're going to have to make sacrifices in other areas, which for them is a score, like how many wall balls. But did they still improve and get a good workout? Definitely.
I had the exact conversation about double unders with a member last week who was like, man, you just battled through those double unders even if you were tripping, and I get so mentally caught up in, okay, I'll slap, I'll try to reset, I'll slap, and then I'll just be like, nope, I'm going to do single unders, because they can't feel that feeling of falling behind the pace of class, and that's competing with the person next to you. It's not necessarily competing with the leaderboard because they're not going to get the RX score. But I think the thing is you have to step back from every workout and ask yourself every workout, because it could be doing singles and not double unders that makes you too competitive, or vice versa. It's not, there's nothing cut and dry here that says from day to day if you're being too competitive or under competitive. You really have to keep yourself in check every workout, every day, assess where you're at when you're coming into that. Am I feeling ready to compete? That's why we're all wearing the Whoop. Like I like to I don't live by my Whoop, but I like to look at my data, because a lot of times the way that I'm feeling or the way that I'm like approaching something might be really off kilter. And I could set myself up for failure that day, thinking I'm ready to go for something, and then I'm really not, biologically not. But our programming is so elegant in the way that you guys set up everything, and Amanda and Beach Fit sets up everything to where it could be a practice day, it could be a training day, or it could be a competing day, depending on how you show up to class. Beach Fit today had strict pull-ups or ring rows, and depending on how far you want to take your ring rows down is how ready you're going to get for strict pull-ups. So like Austin was saying earlier, if you're just standing upright in your ring rows every time and you're not dedicating yourself to getting a little lower, or making it to where you don't have to do all 10, making it to where you maybe have to do 6 and then 4 because you made it so challenging, that's where you're going to get that strength, and that's a little bit more into that training versus competing side.
Yeah, one thing that I would encourage those that have that competitive nature to do is to channel that competitive nature to something that is result oriented, or has some kind of focus to it, intention to it, but it's not the end result. Like as you described your experience with Heartbreak Kid, it wasn't that you just decide, oh, I'm gonna go through the motions and I'm not gonna worry about my score. It's that you change that intention to something else. And I think there's lots of things that we can quote unquote compete for that aren't the end score, that will actually put us more in a practice or training environment and not in a true competition environment.
I think we should compete for who has the best technique in the gym. That'd be awesome.
Austin's dream gym.
Well, I like that you said that, because I think, well, like with the lifts especially, like heavier lifting, I think where people will get the best bang for their buck is if they competed more for technical maxes versus true maxes. And as a byproduct of competing for technical maxes, they'll actually improve their regular maxes as well. And that's really where you're going to see the most bang for your buck. Like if you want to get strict push-ups or strict pull-ups, you have to work at the margin of your experience. Where is that place that's really hard for me, but I can still hit full range of motion, still have good technique? That's where I'm going to get better. Spend my time there. It's not, can I get through Murph with a bunch of push-ups and pull-ups and find a way to kind of push myself through it, even though it might get really ugly. It's how can I work at the margins of my experience?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully this gives you guys kind of a more balanced view on competing. Again, this is not to bash competing, because we have some of the most competitive people here in this podcast, but really get you guys to adopt more of that long-term mindset, not put competing ahead of things like injury prevention and your bigger why outside the gym. So thanks for joining us, guys. We'll see you on the next one.